Right, well, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Shaun, in case you don't know me, and I do a few things for the church. It's me and Martin, if you ever watch a YouTube service where the people are usually controlling the cameras and trying to get the sound and everything right. And if you ever visit the website, I've done a lot of work on the website as well, so that's how I'm involved with the church, in case you haven't met me before. I was a teacher at King Henry VIII School in Coventry, which is by the railway station, used to teach biology. I'm not talking about biology, it's one of the things that influenced me heavily. And there's a lot of other things I could tell you about, but that would take the time up. I know I've been told it's half an hour, so we're just after 2:30 here. I can see the piano clock up there.
We don't mind if you come over a bit.
I hope it's going to work. It's a new bit of technology. I don't really want to stand around the laptop pressing the mouse. So I've got this thing that's meant to work on my phone, but we'll soon find out. Yes, brilliant. There we are. That's a good start, isn't it? Yeah? Okay, so a mouse in my hand. So basically, we're going to begin with Genesis. Nothing too exciting. It said, God created man in his own image. The image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. You all know that extremely well, don't you? So I don't know why I'm bothering, really. But the first thing to note is God is both female and male, because he said he created them in his own image. Therefore, if you think about it, he's both a mother and a father to us. Yes? Interesting thing, what happened when the fall came? Well, Adam blamed Eve. That's the first thing he did. So we might wonder why there's a bit of animosity between women and men. Well, that's a good start. Eve decided to blame the snake. Well, I never got on with snakes myself. But the important thing I want us to remember, man was made from dust, if you remember in the other story of Genesis. And God breathed the Spirit into the man once he'd made him. So it sounds as though he made him out of dust, and then he breathed the Spirit into him. So he was made from the earth, basically, and I want to come back to that later. And interesting enough, responses, this is not me, this is St. Augustine, because I'm not going to pretend that I know much. What we have is, what could have Adam done after the sin? Well, he could have abandoned his wife, said, goodbye, love, I'm innocent, nice to know you. You're condemned. You go out, leave the Garden of Eden. I'll stay here, a bit lonely. I know I was lonely, and that's why I wanted you in the first place, but tough luck. He could, which is what he did, was join her in the sin. But there is actually a third option, which I never thought of. It's St. Augustine, so I'm not going to pretend I'm the clever guy, okay? So that would not be a good idea. Now, the thing I pointed out to you that was God said he was male and female. And therefore I said he was also a mother and father. And occasionally you get the Bible, he does refer to himself as a mother hen. There's a few other references about his maternal instincts that we hear. If you think about the Bible, we hear very little about God in a feminine aspect, if you think about it. Extremely small amount. Who knows? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to answer that. That's probably a 10-week or 3-year PhD or something. If you're going to consider anything like that, it's far beyond my knowledge. Too big a topic for today. But does it have any effect on our lives today? Is it any way that affects how patriarchal society that we have today is set up and the way that religion's influenced the way we are? And I've got this very interesting quote from the Jewish women here. The women added, but ever since we stopped burning incense to the Queen of Heaven, pouring out drink offerings to her, we have had nothing, but have been perishing by the sword and famine. When we have burned the incense to the Queen of Heaven and poured out drink offerings to her, did not our husbands know that we are making cakes impressed with her image and pouring out offerings to her? So it's quite interesting. We often think of the Bible as very monotheistic and there was nothing else going on. But what we do find out is that they certainly, the Queen of Heaven, by the way, his name is Asherah, or Ishtar is the actual name of the Queen of Heaven. And they certainly believed in it. And it was something that the prophets were always trying to get rid of. Used to agitate them. But we don't know how often they were angry, because it's quite interesting. There is a pole to Asherah mentioned in Kings, in the Temple of David, for example. We know that they were on hills. And so it seems like sometimes they got annoyed and sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they were tolerated, sometimes they weren't. But most of the time, because of the way the Bible's structured, we're hearing about how annoyed they get. And what we can rely on, this great chap here, I hope I'm going to say it right, Carol will tell me it's wrong, Hilkiah, he was the father of Jeremiah, by the way. He found a new Deuteronomy. Brilliant guy. He searched around the temple, dug out a Deuteronomy and said, this is the proper one. The one we had before was actually all made up by scribes. I've got a brand new, this is the real, proper, original Deuteronomy. Then he read it to the king. The king got very upset. And he said, this is why we're in such a bad state. Right, can you go and burn all the Asherah poles? Can you take them out of the temple, burn them all everywhere, get rid of them? We don't want any sense of the Queen of Heavens anywhere. We don't want any of that nonsense. Can you get rid of it all? Sadly, since I read that from Jeremiah, I didn't quite succeed because they were still making cakes and annoying Jeremiah. But no more Queens of Heaven, please. God help us. Last thing we want, isn't it? So that was definitely got rid of. And hopefully, I think from Jeremiah onwards, there's far less talk about Queens of Heaven, Asherah, or anything to do with that. So it looks as though they really succeeded in getting rid of that idea. The idea, we think, comes from other religions around there, because God had other names like Elohim. And we think that in some religion, Elohim had a consort called Asherah. And we think that's where the connection came from. And therefore, it was like his wife, in other words, consort. So we think that was still spilling over into the Jewish religion. And women still believed in Asherah, didn't want to give her up. But that all disappeared. And if you look through the Old Testament, the New Testament, there's absolutely no mention of any Queens of Heaven, is there at all? Absolutely nothing. And then what we find is that children, especially in the Middle Ages, it seemed to be children, have these apparitions of Mary. It keeps cropping up all over the place. If you read your medieval history, you're going to find a lot of people having visions of Mary. Two shepherd children reporting seeing an apparition of Mary, weeping, because perhaps she should appear today, weeping, showing to the Lord that we don't respect the Lord's day, which, 24-hour shopping, the gig economy. Certainly don't respect. I remember Carol telling me off because I was popping over to buy something from Lidl and I felt quite bad. But certainly that's gone. I remember when I was young, Sundays were Sundays. Went to a boarding school. We didn't do much on a Sunday. Went to chapel in the morning. Okay, we were allowed to watch the big match, but basically it was a pretty quiet scene on a Sunday. If you go to some of the islands in Scotland, they're still the same, and they're all resisting a co-op trying to stay open on a Sunday. It's one of the Scottish islands at the moment. And of course, there was the Lord's apparition of a shepherd, daughter of a shepherd. And we all know about Lords, and you go and visit there and drink the water, etc., etc. So Mary suddenly makes this comeback, And as you probably know, the Catholics do refer to her as the Queen of Heaven. So suddenly we've been fighting this idea. We got rid of it. The Protestants certainly had nothing in it. Well, so we do actually have a statue of Catherine there. But overall, the Protestants, especially good old Oliver Cromwell, didn't want anything like that in our churches, so he's got rid of all that. Sadly, she reappeared. And I thought there's an interesting statement here. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciples whom he loved standing nearby, this is when he was being crucified, he said, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And I thought that was quite interesting because it goes on about how the son, the idea was that they would look after the mother, but I wonder if it meant a little bit more than that, in a spiritual sense. So I've meditated on that. And sadly, the Pope then went ballistic. As you probably know, in 1951, he really lost it, He decided that after all these visions that people were having with Mary there, he suddenly decided that the Holy Ghost is certainly working through all these people. And, it's almost an echo of the women of Jeremiah's, seeing Asherah, and the women now seeing Mary instead. So... And the fact this was largely cheered, sorry, I used a big word there, I meant to take that out, collective unconscious, ignore that bit. So basically, children, as you know, Jesus said, talks about them being quite innocent, their minds are quite open, they haven't become prejudiced yet, they often don't have racial views about other people, they play with anybody, they're very open children, generally speaking, and that's why one of the reasons he asked us to be like a child. And so that was another reason the Pope was feeling pretty strong about this idea. And the Pope himself, it was rumoured that he had many visions of the Mother of God on the occasion of the Declaration. Of course, he hadn't talked to many people. This wasn't a great debate. They didn't have synods and that. He didn't talk to many other bishops. It's like he made up his own mind and virtually did it by himself, which was a big move. And our Blessed Mother is the new Eve, the new mother of all living in the divine order of grace, if we quote Pope Pius XII, who's the guy who did it. And look, he gave her quite a title there. Work of human redemption as mother, co-cooperator, she remains forever associated to him with a particularly unlimited power in the distribution of grace, the flow from from the redemption, Pope Pius XII. So this is a bit of a shock. I mean, we're going to have all sorts of Lutherans turning in their grave. Calvin's going to go ballistic. Everyone's going to be extremely upset. I don't know what the response of the Protestant Church was to this, but it certainly wasn't happy. If you go to America, you'll still get very right-wing evangelical priests talking about the Pope being the Antichrist. And this would marry up with them. This is pretty bad news for the Protestants. They're certainly not going to accept anything like this. But there's the Pope. In other words, and then, because it was the assumption of Mary, you could almost say that he did say Mary is now in heaven. He's elevated the female principle from earth into heaven. Now, I'm not arguing whether this is true or not. I'm not trying to say that, okay? I have no idea. I'm not a theologian. It's beyond me. I tried theology once. Basically, one guy said this, so I thought, that's good. Then I read another guy who said this, I thought, that's good. But they both disagreed, so I decided, I don't know who to believe. They could both be right. So I gave up theology immediately because it got me absolutely nowhere. But the point was, I think he was being quite prophetic, in a sense, because if you notice all the things that happened over this century, we had the suffragette movement. Right, that was before, so it's not prophetic yet. But we had the war, and he made this announcement just after the war. What happened? All the women were doing all the jobs that the men could do while the men were out fighting. They were in factories. They were doing fantastic work on the Enigma at Bletchley Park. Now, we get all the big people who like the scientists, but they were doing incredible work, working on the signals, Women flew Spitfires, not in war, but they flew Spitfires to take them to where they were going to be flown by men for the war. So as they showed they could do the same work as men. Then the men came back from the war, and what happened was, they threw them out. The unions of the men said, nope, we're not having them in here, out or we don't work. So that was the end of it. And then lo and behold, I love men, they're fantastic. All the researchers in America, all these psychologists started doing research. You know what they found? Women weren't suited to work. No, seriously, all these top men psychologists, we've got to believe them. They found out that women weren't suited to work and they needed to be at home, looking after children. It was all empathy, all the caring, and this is what women had to do. And this suited them. Yeah, they had to leave.
Had to leave.
You had to leave. Go on.
Married.
Yes.
They would not have married women.
What were you doing?
I was in Coventry.
Yeah, what job, I mean?
Sorry?
What job were you doing?
I was a secretary.
And you had to give up work?
When I married, I was told, if you're going to live at Hinckley, do you realise women there go out to work? Because no one did. Everyone, when the men came back, all the married women had to go. And then if one married, then you had to leave immediately. So I knew I had got to leave when I married. But I came to Hinckley, so I managed to work.
There we are. Fantastic. I love to hear that. That's absolutely brilliant. So there we are, history living there for us. So we can see how things have changed. Then we got the women suddenly realizing, well, perhaps we could work, and you bravely showed us the way. They're working. And then we got the 1960s, all the great feminists. We had Germaine Greer, who I think is Australian, but all the great feminists from America started all their writing. Some of it we probably not necessarily agree with, but they started a movement. We got Thatcher to thank for equal pay, though the statistics show we haven't really got there yet, and somebody reckoned it'd still take 30 years for us to achieve it. Just to give you a little idea how it works, 10 years, I think it's 5 years ago, I found out that if you were qualified as a barrister, if you're a man, you'd start on about £35,000 for the good firm, that is. If you're a woman, they offered you about 27. But you can't talk about it because you don't tell people what you're earning. So in other words, there was this biasness and research has shown that women are frequently paid less than men for doing the same job in those higher fields because it's private. You don't say what wage you're getting.
Well, you know that from teaching.
Yes.
Because
go on.
women, before the war, women teachers had to leave if they were married.
Yeah.
But of course, in the war, they fetched them all back. But we were still not on equal pay, which I found quite irritating when I was teaching in a comprehensive school in London,
Brave person.
But I left off for 5 years to have 2 children, and when I went back in 1967, we had got equal pay.
Yes.
That's what I
So
like to
it
hear.
happened in that 5 years between 1962 and 1967.
That's right. I
Yeah,
remember.
so it's amazing what happened. I was talking to Carol and remembered that my wife's earnings were mine. We had the wife's earned income allowance. So my tax return included what my wife earns on it because it was my job to sort the tax out. And women couldn't get mortgages without their father signing it off back in the 60s. Was no go there, ladies. Sorry, if your dad said no, that was it.
When you got married, the wife's salary wasn't taken into account. It was just the
Yes,
man's.
I've forgotten about that. Yes, that happened about the time I was getting one. Yes, my wife's could be taken into account. Phew, or I wouldn't have a house. So, and the reason you're going to use a sort of mythological figure called Artemis for a reason you'll see later. But it's quite interesting. The word's around a lot. The new moon mission to Mars is called the Artemis mission, and I'm going to use it because it's crept in to everyday life in strange ways, but not the actual name, and that's why I've chosen this. But the first thing I want to talk about, one of the things that staggered me, because part of me sees it, is that women had a role, and we've slowly, the Pope did this announcement of the Assumption of Mary, and slowly but surely, it's like it was a bit prophetic, and this role has been left behind more and more by you guys and women today. But one of the things that staggered me was the death of Diana. I couldn't comprehend the death of Diana. I'm not trying to be horrible, but she's a lovely lady, but I didn't know her. She's not my sister. Not somebody I really cared about, but except she did say some beautiful things and she was a very moving person. Anywhere I see suffering, this is where I want to be, doing what I can. I mean, that's the sort of thing Jesus could have said, isn't it? One of his disciples. Profound words, and we saw the work that she did. But I couldn't quite grasp it. People, flowers everywhere, everything. And again, I want to relate that back to the idea of the feminine entering heaven. So suddenly, in some ways, I felt it was the death of the dutiful daughter. If you're a daughter, you go and look after your parents. If you're the one who hasn't got married yet, there's all the I'm not saying you shouldn't. Better tell my 3 daughters, one of them definitely. But I'm not saying you shouldn't. But what I'm saying is there's all these expected things, weren't there, that women had to do, or men had to do as well, but you get my idea. The dutiful daughter, you keep quite quiet, you don't argue with your husband. There's a beautiful 1950s pictures where the dad's there with his pipe, with his slipper by the fire, and mum's cooked all the dinner, put her makeup off and taken the pinny off, and all these, you read some of these books, they're absolutely marvellous when they say how to be a good housewife. They're absolutely brilliant reading. I mean, I try not to laugh too much because I actually realise people were actually doing this and felt it was good, and some people might have found it very happy and satisfying, so we can't disagree with that. But I felt the story was like the fairy story had ended. So in part of the what I call the soul of Britain, the soul of this country and parts of the world, realised that, and you think about it, she actually defied the ruling patriarchy of the time, because divorce doesn't happen. You don't stop being with the king. We saw what happened to Margaret. We saw what happened at the abdication. So this is not what happens, but she stood back and said, no, I'm sorry. And you remember a famous line in that interview, there were 3 people in the marriage from the beginning. And that's the truth. And of course, for Charles, we mustn't feel like he's the bad guy, he really would rather have married Camilla. But he couldn't. And so she defied all that. Pardon? Well, yeah, I suppose he didn't, and I know, but his father did put a pressure on him, from what I understand, saying, now you've gone out with this girl, you can't really not go out with her. So there was pressure. But whether that's rumour, you never know, do you? What's true and what isn't in that case. But we definitely know that statement was on that famous interview on TV, wasn't there? So what we can see is that. And sadly, she tried to escape. Eventually she died. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories. I don't want to leap into those. Who knows? But in some ways, the story was rewritten psychically. So we've got Mary going into heaven. We've got the death of the dutiful daughter. So the whole psychic way that women are thinking and the feminine is developing is changing. But that's sad. That means death, means pain, sorrow, mourning, missing, not belonging, anger, blood even. So in other words, also, women might feel partially lost sometimes or not sure what's going on. And so does the world at the moment. You think what's going on in the world at the moment. There is actually a huge clash between male values and female values. If we think what's happening in America and Russia and put Europe in the middle, we are the woker artery of the world to Trump now. We support LGBT, we have women priests, and we're like the middle, and he doesn't like Europe. He's turned against it. And he's got old Putin on this side, who doesn't also sort of got together with his church, moving against LGBT and all that. Trump has recently sacked, I think, 15,000 transgendered soldiers from the army. He must have been doing valuable work, and so there's a gap. I'm not going to argue about transgender or LGBT or anything. I'm just saying what's happening. So there is a lot going on. But one of the things the dutiful daughter probably comes across, and some of you might have felt listening to your stories, is rage. Anger that this is the way it is or has been. And it's a very difficult thing to come across it. A lady called Sue Monk Kidd, who, I've got the name of the film she did now, something about the bees, Keepers of the Bees or something. She had a famous saying that there's a patriarchal wound quite often in society, and I thought it was very well summed up by a friend, somebody I was talking to, who wanted to train to be a minister, and she was at one of these churches who don't want women as ministers, so she went up to the guy who's in charge and said, "Excuse me, why can't I be a minister?" I said, "Look, I've got all the qualities, I'm pretty good at theology, I've got she went over all the qualities." He said, "Yes, you've got all the qualities, you can be a great minister, but you don't have a penis." That's what he said, literally, not making that up. So he was outspoken. So basically, that was the reason. Men did this, women did this. Sorry, you can't do that job. Okay? So there is, for some, especially some rage. And particularly now, if we think of the things that are going on, for out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. And we've only got to think of some of the things that have been going on today that would make young girls, women, and people like that, and this is where I really should hide because, and I've lost my page, because I need to know who the people are, because I had written it down somewhere carefully. Most of it I've remembered, as you've seen. I haven't used my prompts, but I can't remember who everybody is, so here we go. Right, well, obviously that's Murhad Al-Fayed. I'm not going to go into the stories, okay? This is not sensationalism. You know the stories, you've seen them. I'm not trying to be sensationalist. This is an extremely sad case of Banaz Mahmoud, who was murdered by her father and brothers for an honour killing. If you ever want to, if you've got the guts, there's a superb programme with Keeley Hawes on BBC, who sort of not documentary, a programme covering how they discovered. It's a very sad story. There is, of course, Dominique Pilico that we're just reading about now. Again, I don't want to go into any details. I'm not trying to do anything like that. Jeffrey Epstein, transporting girls, young girls around the world for rich men. The Harvey Weinstein scandal. Sarah Everard, gets a policeman. I mean, sorry, I'm feeling quite that. I mean, it's devastating, isn't it? I remember, what did I tell my kids? Oh, in trouble, see a policeman. Wouldn't you? You'd say that, wouldn't you? Yes? Yeah. In trouble, see the local bobby. Yeah. You'll be okay. Am I going to say that now? What do I feel when I see these WhatsApp groups with the policemen in WhatsApp and things? And again, I'm not going to talk what they say. You can find out if you want to. But am I going to say that to my daughter? Do I feel that confident now? Or my children? Probably not, sadly. So you can see there's this divorce going on between male and female, sadly, at the time. And part of the reason is this anger and rage that women now feel they can feel and are willing to express. And finally, I think an incredible story, which this poor lady got a lot in trouble with, Sinead O'Connor, if you remember, burnt a picture of the Pope on TV. Probably wasn't the best idea, but she knew about the child abuse scandal. What's happened in the Church of England? We've had a scandal. There's also one before that. The Baptist Union in America had a severe problem with sexual abuse. So again, there is this anger. These are the structures that we were told, especially Christian structures, that we are meant to trust. But they've let us down. So that causes alienation. And hence many people are leaving the church, not belonging to the church, don't want to be in the church, and, asking why. Why would we want to be part of this? And this is a great sadness. Now, I'm going to use this word here. I don't like using mythological words, but Emma Jung, if you've heard of Carl Jung, maybe you haven't, it doesn't really matter. But she came up with this very bit that my wife's just reading this book, and she read it out to me when I was sitting on the sofa, and I thought, that's perfect for my talk, I'll slip it in. In my opinion, every woman has an element within herself that could perhaps call the Artemis component. Something natural, free, something desires to be unrelated, to be sufficient unto oneself, something that wishes neither to be daughter, nor wife, nor mother. Mostly it is very hidden. Unconsciously women are completely tuned into a relationship, but I'm convinced that to some degree this is somewhere present in everyone. Now, I'm not trying to say if I believe that statement, whether that's a Christian value or whatever, but what I am saying, that is the sort of feeling that many young women have now. Okay, that is the component, and that's why I used that at the beginning, which is beginning to run their life more than the other component. Like I know my wife and I, we were keen to get married, have children, and that was at the forefront. But for many women now, because of what's dislocating their relationship with society, that isn't the component that's necessarily driving them anymore. This is more the component that's driving them. And perhaps even because the dutiful daughter's died, it's sort of taking its place a little bit, because the old days, get married, have children, this is what you're expected to do, etc., etc. And we can see that from the plummeting birth rates that are happening in all around Europe. I realise I'm actually gone on. It's actually 2 o'clock. Do you mind if I carry on, or?
No.
Okay. I don't want to. And we can see this change. I love this. Here we are, BBC. Do you remember this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what I remember. This Santa said. Actually, it wasn't Santa. I found out it was actually Father Christmas, so I apologise. But anyway, you must use the bow only in great need. I do not wish you to fight in the battle. C.S. Lewis, perfect. I read a little bit more about him. That's exactly what he thought. He doesn't really believe in equality. I mean, he sort of believes we're equal, but not in equality. We each have different functions, and therefore he's not very keen on the idea. He said the fathers didn't do it, and it's not in the Bible, and he quoted it. But there we are. If you've happened to have seen the 2000 Disney film, Susan, trust in the bow, for it will not miss easily. Susan then says to him, aren't you giving me the warning about how a gory battle can be? Because she'd given that warning, Santa had given that warning to her brother. And she said, no, I'm sure you'll be able to cope. So he'd given a warning to the brother, it's going to be gory, battles are hard, but he didn't give a warning to her. So it shows how the language has changed over time. And we only have to think about fiction here. I'm just pushing up. These aren't things you're going to necessarily know. But we had a female Doctor Who. Yeah. Who would have thought that? Regeneration, female Doctor Who. Some of these are what I call young adult fiction, which is having a huge effect, I think, on the psyche of young women and how they think. The Divergent trilogy, which is about a genetic future, but again, the girl eventually sacrifices her life, and it's written by a Christian. So I'm thinking she's getting into the Christian story, sort of using it as an idea. Sadly, this one's not so good. That's his Dark Materials, which Lyra is the new Eve, but sadly an atheist new Eve, which isn't that brilliant. But nevertheless, she is a compelling heroine if you read the book, and extremely tough person. I'm not going to bother about the one on the bottom there, but the one that's caught me the most is, in fact, Katniss Everdeen out of something called The Hunger Games, which, if you want, the trilogy, no, there's 4 films, is actually on ITV, free for the time being. I'm not going to tell you about the story, but she's a perfect idea of Artemis, as far as I'm concerned, in the way the way that she's written into the character of the film. And what's amazing is she has this 3-fingered salute during something called the Hunger Games, in which 24 young people have to fight and only one's left living at the end. She has this salute she holds up because it's all watched on television, so it's showing, like we have all these games on television, like The Traitor, so it's a bit like that, but not so nice. She holds us up to her people to say, look, believe in me, I didn't kill, she's just saved another girl from being killed, and then sadly she gets killed by somebody else. She's not really playing the game. She does not kill anybody in the game, okay? And not amazing enough, there are women in Malaysia using exactly the same symbol in their protests in Malaysia. Then we look at some of the gutsy people we've got here. We've got, okay, I've got some of the names here, so I'm going to flick over. But you probably know who it is, don't you?
Greta.
Yes, Greta Thunberg. You might not agree with her, I don't know. I'm not trying to say whether we should or we shouldn't. Bravery, 15 years old, goes on strike outside her school. I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah? We've got the first lady, as far as I could find out, the first C of E priest in 1994, Angela Burner Wilson's. I hope that's correct. There seemed to be some contradiction. I couldn't quite get to the fact there. I'm Malawa. What a lady. I mean, come on. She is threatened with death. She sticks up for girls. She wants them educated. She goes to school, gets shot. That's how gutsy she wants to be. And then she ends up in this country, goes to King Edward's School, Birmingham, and has gone on to do a lot more work. This is the first lady to say around the world in solo. She started when she was 14, finished when she was 16. I've actually forgotten her name there. Can't remember, sorry. Laura Decker, that was it. The Iranian women. What a country to take a protest in. The hijab laws. Somebody was murdered by the guidance police, Marsha Amini, and these women, the big protests that burnt, some of the biggest protests Iran has ever faced, and it was led by women. No weapons, they were out there fighting for what they believed. And this fantastic woman here, Tarana Burke, it's known as the silence breaker. She was the woman that started the Me Too movement. So she got women talking, got them willing to step out and say the anger and what they felt and what was happening. And finally, one of my favourite is Jacinda Ardern, who was the president of, Prime Minister, and I love this statement from her. Kindness, not being afraid to be kind or to focus or to be really driven by empathy. I think one of the sad things I've seen in political leadership is because we've placed over time so much emphasis on the notions of assertiveness and strength that we probably have assumed that it means you cannot have those qualities of kindness and empathy. So in other words, her whole thing was sometimes she would use kindness in her politician when she was doing. And it made me think of that euthanasia debate. For once, I sat and watched a debate in the Houses of Parliament where people respected each other, were mature, and spoke honestly and with kindness and listened without having to be a member of a particular team. And I thought, why can't we have that more often? Why can't that be the way? Why do we have to have Brexit v non-Brexit, socialist v capitalist? We need to talk. And if we don't talk and have kindness and understanding, we're not going to get anywhere.
Sounds like Churchill. We don't want war, we want to talk. He always said that.
And that's the same here. Basically, I'm going to finish in a minute because I don't really want to go on for too long. Now, this is going to be tricky, actually. Am I going to get the mouse in the right place?
I am here to find a language which takes us back to a time before the foreign tongues of men forged its iron grip on our soul, taking away the words that we needed to express our inner selves. For without the right words, how do we speak of ourselves, or even to ourselves? It is a language that reconnects us to a land, place, time, and space, allows us to once again spin and weave. It has no rules or grammar to stifle its flow or mystify its meaning.
It was not designed to imprison us, for it is the language of a woman's soul.
Sadly, I lost the original advert and I had to add that at the end. And in case you're wondering why the voice suddenly changed there, I had to change the advert, change it there. And that's when she asked me to do an advert for a book. Yeah. So finally, I'm going to finish here and just show you some books. There's some interesting books where people begin to look at the Bible again. The Gospel of John, looking at the Divine Feminine, looking at the women in the book of the Gospel of John. You can get some really weird ones, like, is it okay to call God Mother? That's a big thing. Some women want to say our Mother in the Lord's Prayer. And again, I'm not trying to say that that's right or wrong. I'm not here. I'm just saying what's happening. I'm a bit like a BBC reporter, politically biased probably on the left, but, trying to be fair. But yes, I'm just a report telling you what's going on. Then you get really way out stuff, like when God was a woman. and they're really pushing the boat out there. And if you're interested in Jewish mysticism and Jewish opinion, there's this book here that's about Jewish women. And finally, the one that interests me most, because what I said to you was that Mary went back into heaven, and the word matter comes from the word mater, which is mother in Latin. So material is mother. So I pointed out that if we actually look at the beginning, Adam was made out of soil, which is related to the Mother Earth. And a lot of science, I'm not going to go too deeply in this could be a whole different, this could take months, but basically quantum physics and religion are beginning to overlap. And some scientists are beginning to take a totally different view about matter and spirit. And if you look into various things, it's fascinating. So again, I feel that also was part of what the Pope was saying, that science and religion would stop fighting each other. And they would actually begin to discover there was a route through together. Do you get what I mean? Yeah? So a conversation needs to start. And I'm just going to finish with this one. And that's, I think, this Laura Bates, a very young feminist, she sums it up really well. Fix the system, not the women. In other words, we need discussion. Okay? And that's her way of putting it. Because there is a lot of terrible misogyny online. If you've got young daughters or grandchildren, you might know some of the stuff that goes on. And children and all, it's just terrible. This is stark choice in America. On the top there, the choice, what the women say about, and again, I don't know whether I believe in abortion, I'm not arguing about abortion rights, but women say, my body, my choice. The alt-right have now come out with your body, my choice. In other words, men's choice. And that has a deeper meaning than just about abortions for the alt-right. I don't want to go into what it means. And I'm not going to bother with that bit, because what I'm going to finish with is, ignore that bit, though you can read that while I set up the next bit. Okay, what I did a long time ago, 2 years ago... Oh, sorry. Okay, what does it matter?
Went too quickly.
I will stop that there anyway, because that's not part of the talk. I should have the final bit I want to show you, because that's it. I don't want to keep you for too long. Is a video, a hymn that I did a long time ago to celebrate St. Catherine's Day, which has not been used yet. I did it for Andrew. He said, I'd love to use that. And then it never got used.
Not in medicine.
So, here it goes. And this is me trying to pull the symbolism together. Oh. Okay, so that, as you notice, I used a picture from out there, which is the modern version of Catherine that Andrew got for us. And the idea of this, I was trying to combine the two together through that. And the reason she changed colour was feeling was the major thing, red, and the statue. The statue changed to blue because it was meant to be more reflective colour about thought. And then the idea of the modern version of her burst out, but at the end you notice the statue reformed at the end. So what I was trying to say is that we're going through a great flux of change and everything at the moment. And my feeling is it might look weird and bad, and women are going off in all sorts of different directions, the divine feminine, all sorts of things. But it could be that we're all a bit like teenagers at the moment, and slowly but surely things could start to reform again. And maybe this change is important because I did point out the symbolism of the earth. One of the great dangers we have now is climate change and all the things that are going wrong. So to associate the idea of the Mother Earth fitting into our psyche a bit more could be important to helping us keep this planet going. So my feeling is it's all a bit teenagery, lots of things going on, people getting upset, but it could be that this is a teenage disruption, we're growing up a bit more, and that the future could be different, but there could be a lot of bad stuff happening before that, sadly. That's the end of my talk. I'm sorry it's a bit longer than it meant to be, so I do apologise. So I hope that's okay.
We don't put a time limit.
Well, I was told half an hour, and I timed it myself at home, but obviously I've still got the too nattery teacher in me. Doing it by yourself, you obviously don't talk to yourself quite so much, do you? And lots of you had some interesting stories, so that was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaun, for spending the afternoon with us and actually giving us more things to think about than you would imagine. But it's been interesting and has made us think. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That's what I wanted. Thank you. And just to let you know, I have recorded this for Marion, but if you talked and you don't want me putting that in there, I'll happily take that out. Do you mind if you talk to me during it? Do you mind it going to Marion as well?
That's fine.
You don't mind. You don't mind. Okay. I hope I have, because if I haven't, that'll be a bit annoying for Marion. But
And that's a small thank you from us.
hold on.